But this week's Open, I can't wait. I'm just jumping on it, is about me and how I feel about things. No, it really has more to do with something that I've struggled with, something that I've always thought I was, and I always thought I was pro player. And the more I think about it, maybe I'm not. I've been talking about the NBA on the air now since 2003, okay? It's probably the single biggest thing in my life, whether it's watching, talking to people about it, calling people about it, or just thinking about it. I don't know that there's anything that I've been more involved with than the NBA in the last almost 2 full decades. And I've never been a pro owner guy. I mean, who the hell is pro owner, right? I would never think, hey, when the next CBA, I hope the owners really stick it to them. So that's always made me feel pro player because I've always wanted the players to do well. Unfortunately, they lose at every CBA negotiation. It's just a matter of how much they've had their number shaved down from 57% of the revenue split to just under 50, depending on the rounding numbers and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want that to happen. So I've always felt pro player. Like, it's not even debatable, right? I'm pro player. I'm telling you I'm pro player. But if being pro player means I have to defend every single player now in a movement that we've seen in the last few years when they've demanded change, then maybe I'm not. And it starts with Harden. Harden, who has been the centerpiece of this Houston run, which if I were grading it, I would grade it a lot higher than you guys would probably think because they were going at the West the most difficult time ever, maybe facing the most talented team we've ever seen in Golden State and trying to get through it, and they still almost got through it. So despite all of Harden's playoff failures, which are many, this thing all has kind of worked around Harden, and Daryl Morey and the Rockets deserve a lot of credit of trying to figure this thing out and putting it together and changing it all the time. Because guess what? Harden wanted changes, and they brought in Chris Paul. People questioned it. It actually kind of worked, but then Harden got sick of playing with Chris Paul. Said he couldn't beat people off the dribble. Paul was like, yeah, well, when I beat somebody off the dribble, the other guy comes to help off of you because you never do anything. And then guess what? I'm not saying Paul's the easiest guy to play with, but Harden didn't want to play with him. So they move him, and they move him for Russell Westbrook, who's younger, but more expensive because he's owed more years. And they gave up 4 picks in that deal. 2 firsts that are lightly protected and 2 swaps. And then guess what? That didn't work. Harden didn't want to play with him either, to the point where Westbrook actually demanded a trade before. And then we all know what happened with Westbrook and John Wall. I'll get back to Harden, but I actually want to talk about Wall. Am I supposed to defend John Wall's trade request to be considered pro player? Because John Wall, who I feel like the Wizards have backed the entire time, number 1 overall pick, no problem. They gave him a $85 million extension in July of 2013. If you go back and look at those stories, they actually did it earlier than they needed to, but they just did it because they wanted to have their guys back. John Wall, who has played 73 games total in the last 3 seasons, that guy demands a trade, and he was paid pretty much more than anybody else, and I'm supposed to defend that? Because if I don't, then what's that mean? I'm pro owner? That doesn't seem to make any sense. As a quick aside on the Wall thing, and this is it's not a theory, it's just fact. I get really scared of kind of the year-to-year pricing on players, the perceived value of players, and how drastically it can change in 12 months. So that Westbrook goes from, I got to throw in 4 firsts for Westbrook, to where it's like, actually the only guy a year later I can trade him for is John Wall, who's hurt. That's crazy. But I also think it applies to Wall, that if Wall were to give you a full, healthy season, considering he's still younger and maybe puts up some numbers, because he's going to get numbers on that Houston team, depending on how the team actually looks. If Wall plays for a full year and is healthy, then teams will go, you know what? He's a little younger. He looked pretty good. Little production. It's only 2 years left of money. Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, these things can change really quickly, Westbrook being case in point. So I think that's something at least to have an open mind about with Wall, especially if you're a Rockets fan. But when I go back to the Harden part of it, Harden wanted to play with Wall then. So he wanted Paul, no. Wanted Westbrook, no. Wants Wall, but I mean, he can't want Wall that much because Harden still wants out and wasn't even reporting to the team. Another thing that the Rockets did, and I went back and read these things, when Silas was hired, and apparently they all wanted Ty Lue. Imagine wanting Ty Lue this bad. You're like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm out of here. And because it isn't about Ty Lue. It isn't about the teammates. It isn't about anything. It's in the moment going, you know what? I just want to go somewhere else and win. I'm out of here. Because Silas, and this was actually written a few weeks ago, was like, Westbrook and Harden have not spoken to Coach Stephen Silas, but they have the utmost respect for him, or they have none, Or they have and that's fine, I guess. And I actually give Silas a lot of credit. He's been a lifer in the NBA, so he's got a little bit more. He's got more balls to him than you would think because he is quiet. I've always liked him, and he's like, yeah, all right, whatever. Like, I don't know what to do about this anymore. So you can ask me all you want. I don't know if it's fine, but look, we want Harden to be here. He's not going to be here. The other part of it too was that they made John Lucas a lead assistant because that was going to change everything. Even to the point where I read, D'Antoni was threatened by John Lucas because he was so tight with Harden. How tight is he? Because Harden doesn't care. He was named lead assistant. Does pro player mean defending Anthony Davis? The funny thing about the Anthony Davis force out of New Orleans is now it doesn't even look so bad considering what we've had between Westbrook, Wall, and Harden in just a few weeks. But Davis, and I think the problem is the rules, they at least were accepted that the rules were if you had a year left, then it was okay to ask for a trade. But if you have 2 years left, then it isn't as cool. And basically, Anthony Davis just hit the nuclear button, but he didn't do it. He let Clutch do it. And it's not like Clutch is the first agency to decide, hey, we want our guy out, and we also want him to go play with another one of our clients, a guy named LeBron James, to help everybody out here. They're not the first to do it, but that's what they did, and that's why people didn't like it. And Davis, you could at least say, New Orleans, not a great franchise at that point. It's pre-Griff, injury history, kind of ownership that was in flux there. And the rest of the roster wasn't great, even though they had that one playoff series against Portland. But that's a first-round sweep, so it's really not that big of a deal. But does that mean I have to defend that? I mean, there are other examples of this. I like Kawhi. I like him a lot. But do I have to be pro player and defend Kawhi just saying to the Spurs, I don't want to play for a year? Is that cool? We could talk about misdiagnosed injury. We can talk about long-term injury stuff that he apparently is going to have, which I believe to this point. But do I have to defend a guy just saying, I don't really want to play. I don't like you guys. I don't like the doctors. I'm just not going to show up for an entire year. Trade me. Do I have to defend that? I can never defend Paul George. We've been over this one over and over and over again. But what if Paul George and Kawhi decided after this year, if it doesn't go well, hey, we want out? And that's why it scares the hell out of me, too, when we talk about some of these other things that could be corrected. Everybody has pushed in all of these draft picks to do whatever they can, and part of me understands it. I definitely understood it with the Clippers going, hey, all these picks mean Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, so what's the debate? But what if Paul George or even Kawhi were to bounce? I don't think Kawhi leaves L.A., and he's certainly not going to go to the Lakers now that LeBron's extended there. But what if this ends up only being a 2-year run and you sacrificed all these picks? I could see teams between the Westbrook deal and the Paul George deal saying, you know what, maybe we should stop doing that for guys that we have very limited control over contractually. I mean, Paul George, we've been over the quotes and all those different things. Do I have to defend Paul George to convince you that I'm pro player? What if in a few years a guy signs a 5-year deal? So he's under control for 5 years with a new max and then plays 1 year and has 4 years left of team contractual control and says, yeah, I don't want to be here. Do I have to defend that? Low key, Steven Jackson actually did that years and years ago. You can go and look it up. He signed a 3-year, I think, extension. It wasn't huge money. It was good money back then. And then he was like, all right, I'm out of here. I asked him about it on a phoner and he hung up on me. I think we're cool now. But I was like, hey, when you did that thing, he's like, what? Think about this as it relates to the league, because what if the NFL did this? What if, and I'm going to use Josh Allen and the Bills, although you don't have to worry about it, Bills fans, but what if in a version of this, an NBA version of a young quarterback that became the norm in the NFL? Your team isn't that good. It's not in a major market. It's not one of the 5 cool markets like we have in the NBA. So whatever the 5 cool NFL markets are, I don't even feel like doing that because that's not part of the debate. Different podcast. What if you had Josh Allen and then year 3 he looks really good and he was awesome this week? He's turned his career around. Josh Allen's looks like he's going to be terrific. But you spend a year on Buffalo Talk Radio going, yeah, heard he wants to leave. Too small of a market. Won't take the extension. Should we trade him now? You've been waiting to get any kind of success up there for a long time. What if that was the norm in the NFL, where anytime you drafted a good young quarterback after a decade of failures, the first thing you worried about once he became pretty good is if you were going to be able to keep him for year 4 or 5? That would kind of suck, wouldn't it? Now, when it comes to Harden and the trade part of this, here's what I feel good about saying, and that is I think the Simmons deal for Harden is they're waiting for Houston. I think Philadelphia would do Simmons for Harden yesterday. I don't know what Houston's current state is. I don't know if they want to ride this out. People could talk about, the longer you wait, the lower the price goes down for Harden. I don't believe in that stuff. You don't know what's going to happen. What if somebody gets hurt on another team that's really good and they're able to figure something out? We can't predict these things. We get tons of this stuff wrong and projecting, this is the most likely, I don't know that the price goes down. Maybe it goes up. And I know everybody says it. I know people are listening to this right now disagreeing. I resist that. I resist that we know emphatically what the price would be. Maybe Houston thinks Ben Simmons isn't good enough. I would tell you, based on the rumors of who's available and out there, especially if you looked at the version of a Brooklyn deal, I don't know what the picks would end up being. Like, I want real picks that actually could be really good with these supposed deeper drafts the next couple of years. But I would just do the Ben Simmons deal. Now, Simmons and Wall isn't perfect, but it's probably better in some version of seeing Wall and Simmons run around together than Simmons and Embiid just get in each other's way. So I don't know if Houston would do it, but if that's the best out there, I think you could do a lot worse. I'd rather trade Harden for a B piece than, I don't know what the grades are on Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert. They're nice players, but they're also going to be guys you have to pay like $20 million. So I'm getting a couple like B minus C plus pieces for an A piece. I'll just take the B, maybe even a B plus, because I think Simmons, away from everything, running up and down and having more control of the basketball and not having a big that's bringing all this attention to the middle of the court, I actually think that version of Simmons is one I want to see. So I don't know if it gets done, but I think it's available for them. And I actually think it makes a little bit more sense in an impossible situation. Also, extra nugget, I think PJ Tucker wants out. I can't imagine he wants to stay there. So maybe PJ Tucker is part of the deal, flip somewhere else, or maybe is in some kind of transaction there. But let's go back as we conclude here. So forgive me if I don't want to defend playoff flameout James Harden, who's asking for a trade. Forgive me if I don't want to defend the guy that can't report to camp because he's at the club. I'm sorry I don't want to defend the guy posting emojis on IG like a conflicted teenager. Forgive me if I don't want to defend the guy that wants all of his buddies traded to the team and giving up assets for him. And then as soon as he plays with them, he realizes, I don't really want to play with this guy because that other guy probably doesn't want to play with you a ton. And forgive me if over the years, as great as Harden has been and as talented as he is, I've never denied that this whole system is inflated to make him look like a historically great player that's probably a little misleading. And honestly, Houston fans, I feel bad for you. You've invested years, all sorts of terabytes defending this guy. And I wonder, in your movement to defend Harden over the years, are you still defending him now because you're so pro player? I doubt it. Because now he's just said, I don't care. I don't care about any of that. And none of it really mattered to me as much as you thought it did. And that's always the scary thing as you get a little bit older about that pro-athlete relationship, is that a lot of them just don't actually care as much as you care. And I don't know who's right in that one. So I'm not even criticizing the athlete. You know, owners, every time we get close to a CBA, they start complaining about all the money that they're going to lose. And it drives me crazy, right? It drives me crazy because even if your operating costs are too much and you're not turning a profit the way you're used to turning a profit, and guys that put in $1 billion want a bigger return than the year-to-year returns of running a franchise. If I told you could buy a house for $500,000 and that along the years, maybe it's going to dip on Zillow a little, or the landscaping costs are going to be too much, or the HOA is a little higher than you'd like it to be, but you're going to sell that house for $2 million in 10 years, would you be okay with that transaction? You probably would. And that's the case with every owner with all of these teams. I don't know if the current climate is going to change some of this stuff, but for the last, 20 plus years, like, who's writing the articles about the guy that took a bath on buying a pro franchise? You don't see it. You don't see it because it doesn't happen. So why would I root for that guy? I mean, that would be like the guy complaining, my kids, they're messing up the lawn outside. You're going to quadruple your investment on the house. Don't worry about the landscaping costs. And that's what I would say to any owner that complains about all these short-term things, because they're all going to clean up. So I'm never rooting for that person. But as I sift through all of these player stories over the last couple of years, and then I'll see people defend them, and they're like, wow, I've always got the players back. I mean, players are going to cape for players. They just are. They are, and you can argue with them. It's just, there's no point. They were on that side of it. They have a very different perspective than the rest of us. These are the elite of the elite. They are special. They see something amazing when they look in the mirror because it's kind of true. So the normal rules don't apply to these guys. But whenever I'm thinking about a new demand and I go, wait, am I anti this guy? And then I'll think, I thought I was pro player, but maybe I'm just pro league.